Hello everyone, welcome to the Cyber Weekly. The Cyber Weekly is a podcast which talks about cybersecurity with me, Deogratius Okello, and Josephine, Olok, my co-host. Today we welcome Erin, but before anything, as usual, Josephine, do you have anything to say?
Hi, Deo, and great to be here. Welcome, Erin, to our podcast. It's great to have you on our podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Josephine usually says humble podcast. I don't know why she didn't say this time.
I dropped that a while ago.
It's no longer humble.
Too much to say. No, it's too much to say. I just welcome to the podcast. Yeah.
Sweet.
Okay. So I'll quickly run down through Erin's profile. She's currently working at Corvus, where she's the risk and response manager since August of 2023. In terms of insurance expertise, she has experience as an insurance broker specializing in cyber and technology, E&O liability with connected risk solutions since March of 2020. Then previous experience, Erin has a background in account management and production with roles at Brown and Riding Insurance Services and Uncovered HC, where she led cross-function teams and managed API integration. When it comes to a marketing background, her early career includes working as an account executive for Boeing at FCB Chicago, where she focused on operations, project initiatives, and marketing strategy. That is Erin for you. Erin, how are you?
Good. How are you? It's always funny to hear your life summed up in a 2-minute or even probably less than that spread. It's good.
Yeah, so
Walk down memory lane.
So, Erin, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you have such a wonderful personality.
Oh gosh, lots of experiences in a lot of different areas, if you can tell anything by my background. As a kid and as a young adult, I was really interested in ideas and how things connected, human behavior, and that's what led me to start in advertising and get my feet wet in that arena, if you will. I got the blessing of working on a company like Boeing, who just has so many different functionalities, different areas of exposure, from their commercial to their defense, which is where I specialized, and then their analytics, which is where they start touching the cyber. And that's where my interest in cyber started to really be piqued. I worked with really intelligent individuals and was able to just get exposure to that space. And as we all have become aware and now can see across the world, cyber is a hot topic because of all the risks, the exposures, and the attacks that are happening every single day. So outside of that, I kind of look for the adventure in things and continuously learning, and have found myself sitting across from you. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. So thank you for that answer. So you came across cyber when you're at Boeing, is that right? And why did you end up in insurance, in cyber insurance?
Yeah, it's funny. You ask anybody in insurance how they got in insurance, and there's like one of two answers. There's either I fell into it by complete mistake, or I had a family member. And I am the latter. I had a family member. My father did healthcare benefits, and I was just looking for a transition, knew I was interested in cyber, had that exposure to analytics, but was looking for a different business model. And he just said, look into insurance. It's a really stable market. It's recession proof, because I have to think from a logical perspective of a human that needs to stay alive and pay my bills. But I connected with a lot of individuals and was really intrigued because the cyberspace is very different than other lines of insurance. So property, personal lines are necessary, very straightforward. Cyber, we like to refer to as the Wild West, and it still very much is in that realm, and things are continuously changing. So I liked that pace. I liked the dynamicism of all the different risks and the fact that people were constantly trying to figure out how to even rate risks and understand the nature of claims. It was so new when I joined. So family member brought me over the bridge, and then I got sold on the other side by just the nature of the business.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You sound more like an African, because most of the time people doing some businesses because of family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, property is the Wild West, especially if you're dealing in certain areas. So I don't want to discredit that at all. But yeah.
Okay. So, what skills have you found transferable from the previous roles to your current roles in cyber insurance?
I would say insurance remains one of the most relational business industries that is supplemented by technology. As you can see in insurtechs, they've found that middle ground between the two, but ultimately the people are the bread and butter, and the ability to think strategically, use critical thinking skills about problems that are not black and white, that are very dynamic in nature. I had to do that with marketing because you're constantly looking for creative ways to talk to people. This is similar in the manner of just talking to people about a different subject matter, and how can you get a business or an insured policyholder, whatever you want to refer to them as, to understand the nature of their risk, the exposure they actually have, and tell it in a way not only that they're going to understand, but that's going to motivate them. This is still a very early line of coverage. We're very much in its infancy still, and it's still in a form of early adoption. A lot of companies have gotten to the point of getting cyber insurance, but the rest are still reluctant for a lot of different reasons. And so bringing them across that bridge is definitely something, and having the skills to communicate and explain, help them understand, put it in language they'll understand versus just talking security speak sometimes. So those are some of the strongest transferable skills.
Yeah, I think in Uganda, Africa generally, insurance is a really hard sell. So I can imagine that cyber is just on another level. Cyber insurance is on another level. So yeah, I think that's definitely, as you say, it's very new territory. And of course, I'll ask later to tell us about how we can get cyber insurance even in a market like ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the intangible nature of it. So if you're talking about personal or property, you have your house, you have your car. Those are you can touch those things. The impact to them is very concrete. Whereas in cyber, it's very intangible. It's very esoterical in some ways. And so that definitely impacts that ability to make that sell even harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we understand that at Corvus you have a platform that you use. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, and then how do you use it to help your customers identify their vulnerabilities and reduce their exposure to cyber events?
Yeah, we have an online risk prevention platform, so it is accessible to any policyholder that has a policy with us. It will pull our external scan, which is a proprietary scan that is based on external vulnerabilities and exposures that it can pick up from any internet-facing exposure. So ultimately, what that does is gives not just a score, but insight to us on where your vulnerabilities exist. And what we do with that and our platform supplies are actionable and tailored insights. So the idea, and I'll probably speak to this a little bit later, but in cyber insurance, every business is a snowflake. There are so many different factors that make you a significantly unique risk. And so our platform supplies actionable insights that are specific to you because of your vulnerabilities, because of your industry, because of your revenue, your internal exposure as well. Our platform will offer a security questionnaire that helps our team not only develop better advisory that can help you in getting to a better security posture through calls, through emails. We facilitate from that human to human perspective, but also the actionable insights get even deeper. We can provide access to vendor marketplace that will give you exactly what you're looking for in terms of the control that you might be missing that might help you get to that better security position.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So I'm assuming then that you don't insure everybody. There's some.
Sorry,
So there
was
are
that too quick? I'm like, no.
Yeah, so there are some companies with a profile that is untouchable. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And you know, I've got like the quick response in my head from my broker days, which is like, you pay enough, we'll write it. But that's not an appropriate response for where I'm sitting today. You know, the way we look at risk is influenced by a lot of different things. It's influenced by that external scan. And what that's doing is basically looking for exposures like open RDP, known exploited vulnerabilities, exposed remote access. And because of our claims data, we have run modeling and predictive modeling that allows us to see which types of exposures are going to most likely lead to claims or have a higher risk of attack. And when we're looking at that from an underwriting perspective, amongst other variables, you know, that is at times too high of a risk for us to take on. There are certain industry classes that fall into that. The market fluctuates and things change over time. I give the example of when I was a broker, you know, we were looking at some certain industries where they had no controls whatsoever. Hospitals were a great example. And now in today's day and age, we'll write hospitals because, you know, they actually tend to have higher security postures, knowing the risk that they are with a high amount of PII, high amount of PHI. They're actually taking the steps to be the best in their industry when it comes to security, which makes them a better risk. But those types of things fluctuate based on what we see in our claims, what we see from an individual's exposures, and then knowing where threat intel sits. And if we're seeing things exploited in the wild and you as a policyholder and insured has that on your either your application or we see it on our scan, makes it less likely for us to write you.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for qualifying the no.
Yeah, I mean, because this is insurance where, you know, you'll find somebody to write it. How much you'll pay for it is a different question.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, from an insurer's perspective, what are the key factors to consider when evaluating a company's cyber risk and determining the insurance premiums or coverage?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to my comment about each business being a snowflake. And a lot of the times I do wish there was like a one size fits all. The market has standardized. So I remember when I was back in 2019 and there was all these shifts and there was a lot of confusion. And one of the great things about the market in general is that it has moved and has enough claim data now to start seeing things that are fundamental. So bare minimum security controls, MFA on privileged access, administrative, and on remote access. Looking for filtering on your emails, making sure that if you are dealing with wire transfers, then you have an out-of-band authentication plan in place. Now, with that being said, depending on your risk profile, some things are more important than others. Not to say that from a security perspective, I ever want to categorize things in that manner, but we've started to understand things from like a high criticality perspective to a low criticality perspective. So you have an open RDP, you need to get that fixed right away, or you're an automatic decline from a new business perspective. So from anybody that's looking for insurance, making sure that you're aware of what those bare minimum controls are for the insurance market in general. Now, each carrier is going to have a different appetite. They might have different ways of assessing risk, which impacts the controls they look for. But going back to that standardized point, most of the carriers in today's market are on the same page when it comes to those things. Premium coverage, again, fall kind of in that same no one size fits all. I think the advice I can give to that point is know where your individual exposures exist and make sure whoever you're working with is giving you coverage to match those exposures. And let me know if that answered your question. I know that's not a straight line.
I'm not complaining.
Okay. Sometimes you have a policyholder that will be like, that is not the answer I wanted. And I'm like, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you've had to pay off claims for clients. So supposing a client gets a major cyber incident, how would that process happen? How would it happen, the insurance process? Can you walk us through that?
I can touch on it. I don't sit in the actual claims department, so I have my understanding, and actually I can share what Corvus does really well and is differentiated in the market because of this. We work heavily to be preventative when it comes to claims, which ties into our threat intel team. We have a great team that sits and monitors the dark web and brokers that are selling access or credentials, and we tie that back to our policyholders. So if one of our policyholders has something, we immediately alert them. And so what that looks like from even the step before a claim happens is something gets popped, our threat intel sees it. We reach out to the policyholder. Sometimes we can't even get a hold of them. We had a case about 2 weeks ago where it was over the weekend, and we found that some significant credentials of an access point were being sold, and we wanted to alert them, couldn't get them on the phone, had multiple reach outs. And so what we ended up doing was reaching out to the third party, which was the connecting factor of that exposure point. And ultimately not only saved that client the pain and the headache of going through a claim if it had happened, which would have looked like ransomware and over $500,000, but saved even more clients that were working with that third party vendor because they were ultimately the point of exposure. So doing those types of things is where our team excels, and we really try to put our focus on. In terms of the claims handling, we are constantly available. One of the things that we encourage, and this is fairly unique in the market, we want policyholders to make claims because it helps us get in early and often when it comes to incident response. We don't handle incident response, but we have coaches that basically will talk policyholders through that process, give them our recommendations, connect them to vendors that can help them facilitate in terms of forensics or if they need counsel. And then our claims team is just there to handhold the entire way. Wrapping that entire process up looks like a post-claims consult. So our risk advisory team will jump back in and say, this happened, it happened for a reason. What are the things that you as the affected individual or business can do next time round to avoid something similar to this? So we'll deep dive into their controls and we'll understand what happened and why it happened and give recommendations based on that.
Yeah. So, and that support is all contained within the coverage or the premiums that they pay you, right?
Yep. All of our risk advisory, threat intel, that's all free with the policy. It comes with it. And, I like to emphasize it's not something you have to turn on. It's automatically on. Our team is very altruistic, especially the threat intel team. They very much want to make sure that all of our clients are handled with care and are avoiding those claims as best as possible to the capability that we have.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds like very comprehensive.
Yeah. So now, when it comes
support
to
and coverage.
how do you stay ahead of the emerging threats? You have already talked about it, but and in terms of the insurance policies, how do you ensure that they are relevant and effective?
And from the perspective of a business, so if I were a business, how would I stay ahead of emerging threats? Or how do we as Corvus stay ahead of emerging threats?
The second option.
How does Corvus? Okay. So our threat intel team is the impetus of all of that. So they're the ones that are constantly reviewing, or not even just reviewing, they're looking, actively monitoring anything that's happening. They're constantly in what's called the wild, which is where threat actors are participating in their business models. They're constantly looking at what different groups are doing. So Alpha Cat, Black V, and are just staying ahead of that and thinking through predictively based on their analysis what this could mean coming down the pike. So that finger on the pulse is ultimately what keeps us ahead of those threats. We also do look at our claims data. We have really great analysis tools that we look to see if there are trends that can indicate or predict where threat actors are focusing, and where they could be looking in the next season, or if there's anything from the perspective of a specific supplier or provider that is being attacked heavily. And then we will alert our policyholders of those exploits and those vulnerabilities, whether or not they fall on, the KEV list or whether or not anybody's actually talking about them right now. We rely heavily on the analysis of, or on those analysis to provide those predictive and analytics, if you will.
Do you find that your policies remain change as the threats do, or do they stay consistent?
From the product form itself, the actual coverages?
Yes.
So they will remain standard unless in occasions of claims, if something specific happened, so say a big ransomware, There's cases where we can potentially sublimit, but those are all contextual and it's very case by case. It is not the common factor, if you will, when we look at that. Our product form, we stand by it and we offer as much coverage as we possibly can. But underwriters are looking at each case specifically, understanding their exposure, taking into account, have you had a claim? What does it look like? And more importantly, what have you done since then? Oftentimes, the story after an impact is more important than the impact itself, because mostly you want to see a company that is now aware and has felt the pain and says, I understand, so I'm going to do what actually is needed to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Ultimately, I think of cherry picking from a threat actor perspective. There are a lot that are sophisticated and are going after the big whales, and there are a lot that are just relying on the RAS model, and they're not so sophisticated, and they're looking for that low hanging fruit, and they will hit you multiple times if they can. So if you're sitting and you're allowing them to, because you don't take those security controls seriously and update them and do patching and all that, we look at that as, I don't want to say negligence, but there's that tone to it, if you will.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. And in your experience, are there some misconceptions that organizations have about what cyber insurance is? And then how do you address these misconceptions to enhance their preparedness for risk?
Yeah. The two main misconceptions that I came across were, one, I don't need it, and two, I'm okay with just having a sublimited first party coverage on my BOP or some other package policy. What happens with those, and I used to have this conversation with a lot of policyholders, because I don't need cyber insurance. My question to them is, do you use your cell phone in the midst of your business operations? In today's world, the answer is 99.8% yes. And that's exposure. That is exposure right there. Somebody can get into your email, somebody can access your financial documents. A lot of the times that's a great avenue for social engineering because people have their guard down. So there are a lot of ways that just making it relatable to your second part of that question is helping policyholders or businesses understand what your exposure is, and not necessarily in the way of, okay, well, I'm trying to think in a relatable way. So you want to make sure that they understand in the actual functioning of their business, these are the points where a threat actor could actually get into their system or, insert ransomware, malware, how they're susceptible, like anybody else, to social engineering. Phishing is one of the top ways to get in, one of the top reasons we have claims, because a lot of people still don't have training around not clicking the local pizza's coupon, because lo and behold, it's actually not a coupon. It's now just downloaded malware. So helping them understand that front end part, and then the back end is how it impacts your business and what that looks like. And oftentimes, one of the clearest demonstrations I could give was, if your computers or your phones went down for a day, could you do your business? Answer is typically no. And it's like, okay, you can't do your business today. What is the financial impact of that? You can't make calls. You can't hold meetings. You might have a product that you need to deliver. Now it's pushed back. So now you may need to look at delays. You may need to look at overcharges. You may need to look at outsourcing to a vendor that you had not budgeted for. So putting it in the terms of their business, rather than just saying, oh, business interruption. Great, but I, as a new person who doesn't really understand cyber insurance, I don't really know what that means. as soon as I make it, this is what happens to your business specifically, that's when the look of, oh, I need that. And then they're like, well, does my package policy cover it? And I'm like, no, it does not. Maybe some of them do, but they're very minimal coverage. And some people think $100,000 sub limit is enough coverage. And I asked the same question using the same scenario. I'm like, okay, you had that one day down, just one day. How much does that realistically cost you? Is it $100,000 or is it more? If it's $100,000, then okay, maybe you're fine. But if it's more, you're going to need more. You're going to want more.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I feel like I'm now a guru at cyber insurance. I'm about to ask for a job there.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's a fun space, you know,
Yeah.
and I used to say that to clients, and the amount of looks I got that were just like, you're crazy. And I'm like, don't know what to tell you. It's fun.
So can you walk us through a hypothetical scenario of a major cyber incident and how
I've
the
asked
insurance...
that already.
You already asked that? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you stay ahead of the emerging
In
threats?
Uganda,
Yeah.
you lost your place. So the third question under conclusion. In Uganda.
In Uganda, getting cyber insurance is difficult, and few insurance companies offer it. What would you advise our listeners to do to improve their chances of getting their companies insured?
Yeah. I was curious about this one, to be honest. I don't know much about the market over in Uganda, and I've dealt with some international risks, and I know that there are international carriers that will write in different domiciles and territories. So, but I would love to pick your guys' brains a little bit about, you know, what's making it difficult. Is it purely access, or what else is it?
I think it's because it's not a well-known, the IT industry, cyber risks, they're considered very high, and also not enough is known about them. So often when you go for insurance, they try to give you something else. They try to sell you a basic cover or something that doesn't really talk to what would happen if you had a cyber attack. So there's a general lack of awareness of what it entails, and also the packages are limited. But for the industry that I work in, for instance, in the fintech space, our members are considered very high risk because there are many cyber incidents where banks have lost money, or there's been third party because of the third party connectivity. There's been a lot of fraud and such things. So it's almost like we don't want to touch this. But in the conversations we've had with the insurance industry, they've said, listen, we want to understand better, but we also want to know what are you doing to mitigate some of these risks that are in the
Got you. So
market.
It sounds like, oh, I'm so sorry, you cut out.
So I think it's a difficult one because on both sides. No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Oh no, I think we're just a little lagged. Yeah.
Yeah. So on both sides, we it's a struggle because it's yes, the businesses are high risk, and there's a lot of fintechs have a lot of the technical infrastructure to prevent cyber attacks. But the industry itself, the insurance industry, really doesn't want to take the risk, but also they don't know enough about the industries, the IT industry and all that. So it's one of those.
Okay. So it sounds like almost the businesses are trying to convince the insurance carriers that writing cyber in general is worthwhile.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Definitely a unique problem. I think from like a business case, carriers are always that's going to be it. They will write things that make sense to them. So yeah, helping them understand and this puts a lot of legwork on the business and the fintech. So using that as an example, you would have to say, we do understand our exposures. Here's exactly what those are and why those are the way they are, So, to your point about a wire fraud transfer or any type of funds transfer, but I have to imagine the privacy concerns are huge. I don't know about your guys' regulation, but around those types of things, but I'm sure that plays a part in it. And I would just say probably making a business case. To your point, we understand that this is where we are in the nature of how a threat actor looks at us. And now we're moving into a space of, okay, these are all the things that we are doing to mitigate against them. So, it sounds like because of the nature of the insurance industry, they may not even have what would be termed bare minimum controls. So there's some creativity here almost for the businesses to say, these are the bare minimum controls. And so from this point, we get to understand, what makes this an attractive risk for you. And there's a lot of power in that if they don't have the understanding, but at the end of the day, their premium is going to be established based on what they think the risk is worth. But you get to play into that space of defining that framework in a way. Ultimately, I'd have to do some deeper diving into market access, but there are international companies too that do write cyber. And so maybe that's an avenue as well, as like looking outside of local and seeing what might be accessible through, a larger form brokerage or a wholesale brokerage.
Yeah. I think the best part of it is that it is being done elsewhere. So it's not, we're not asking for something that's never been done anywhere. The cyber risk can be a good selling point for the insurance industry here, for them to know that it is being done elsewhere. It's just perhaps how to do it better, or how do you ensure that you're covered on your side as an insurance industry, that you're not just insuring very high risk, but you're insuring companies that are managing their risk and mitigating against their risk, and have a good standing. So
and then to that point, having exposure and knowledge of what other carriers' products look like. So being able to come knowledgeable to that table, saying, I'm not just going to accept that sub limit or that first party coverage. I want a full coverage form, and this is actually what it looks like, and having that to reference can be helpful as well, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it would be. Okay, that's good. We have some work to do, but nice. Thanks for the answer.
Yeah, no, I'd be curious again. You're in such a different place, and it's so easy to come into an established insurance market for one, and then cyber. It's been around for a little bit, but now it's still, the wheels have been greased, and having to convince a carrier of the risk and being willing to take it, that has piqued my interest. So now I'm curious how they did it in the very beginning. I'm thinking of Lloyd's of London, and when they sent the ships out and they wrote the first insurance policies, wondering how those captains of those ships approached the bankers and basically said, hey, like, there's a likelihood of this maybe happening, like, let's strike a deal. So maybe there's something in history we can pull from.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So finally, is there any book or article you have read or documentary you have seen recently that you would recommend for our listeners?
I hate these types of questions because
before you answer, let me say why I put that question there.
Okay.
On your profile, you said, I'm the kind of person who always says, have you read this, or have you?
Yes.
I picked it.
And that's why I'm laughing, because I'm just like, I have so many. And so like the idea of choosing one is like I'm like, it's like asking me what my favorite book is. I have no idea. But I was talking about this with another individual. Not recently, but it is one of my favorite books, and it relates to this space, is Kevin Mitnick's, I think it's Man in the Wires. So he is the owner of Know Before, which is a huge consultancy and vendor now, provide really in-depth, great fishing training. But his story is so interesting because he started as a hacker and started in the 80s. And it was around the time when, you had to print off the code, if you will. They didn't even have a monitor in which you could kind of do that type of work. And he was hacking AT&T and different cell phone providers, got on the FBI most wanted list, and then switched it around and became I guess what would be termed a white hat hacker, and helped the FBI, I believe, identify different ways of how these hackers were infiltrating, because he knew how to do it himself. So those types of stories are just so fascinating to me. So I would recommend that one. It's a good read. He's interesting. His story is really wild. And
Ghost in the Wires.
Ghost in the Wires, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. No, that's going on my list. So that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. And documentaries? No? Any documentary?
Oh, I was just watching one on trees. And now I'm gonna blank on the name. Give me 1 second while I quickly use handy dandy Google. I think it's, oh gosh, what is it called? I should have had this prepared. Oh, Trees and Other Entanglements. It's a really beautiful documentary. It talks about humanity, trees, the connection between somewhat spiritual. It's an interesting one. It is not related to cybersecurity.
It's okay.
Okay, good. I was like, that does not fall under this topic. But
It's okay. We try to be as broad as possible. I know we focus very much on cyber insurance, but this is just the last question. Is there anything else you want to tell us about your experience, which is not cyber insurance, which you would have liked us to ask you about?
no, the only plug I will say is for Threat Intel team. They're so good at what they do, and oftentimes are sending a lot of emails and making calls. And, if ever asked, what are the things I can do as a business to make sure I'm ahead of threats, or I'm doing everything I can to avoid a cyber incident, it's listening to those, because that team has their pulse on things, and they're 2 weeks ahead because they're right alongside those threat actors and watching things as they happen. So, they're the leading vanguard, if you will, and are great to have as a part of anybody's, supplemental security team, if you will.
Okay. I think we really appreciate the time you've taken with us. Highly appreciate it. I know you're busy, and of course we had our ups and downs, but I'm so glad you're able to join us today. Any last words, parting shots before we say goodbye?
No, I appreciate this opportunity. You guys have been great. I would love to stay in contact and hear how you guys approach that last problem. I'm very curious on that one. And if I can provide any further help or connection to individuals that might be able to help in that situation, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. We'd highly appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know Josephine doesn't usually blow her trumpet, but she's the chairman of FITSPA, which is the Financial Technology Service Providers Association. So
Gotcha.
she heads that board, which helps most of the fintechs in the country. So she's the
Gotcha.
right person to actually address most of those issues. That's why she was so curious about such things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
because it's something we're working on. Yes. We're
Yeah.
trying to get our members insured. Yeah. Yeah.
That makes
But thank you.
sense. Yeah, no, and even if take it offline, it's a creative problem. So
Yeah.
probably frustrating at points, but fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay. Without, I want to end it here, but please check out our episode with episode 12, which is Dr. Ann Moore,
Okay.
an AI researcher at Nokia.
Okay.
Other than that, see you. Please follow Erin Tesla. Actually, she has social media, her LinkedIn and
Yeah.
Twitter. Yeah. Other than that, see you in the next.